Hello.
Hi,
Namaste.
Pratyaksh.
Hi, Bhakti. How are
Namaste.
you?
Very well. How are you?
Good, good. Can you see and hear me fine?
Yes, very well.
Okay, good, good, good. I can hear you well as well.
Fantastic.
Yes. Welcome. On behalf of the Temple of Cosmic Religion, it's my distinct pleasure and honor to have you as our guest today. It is our first interview that we're doing after I've set up the social media pages that we have for our organization. So you are the first guest that we're having. So I'm really, really thankful for you to have the time for us.
Well, thank you so much. That's really a privilege and an honor to be invited by you guys and to be the first.
Thank you so much. For our viewers, I just wanted to start off with, I want to tell you that I'm not sure if we're actually going live on the Facebook because I tried to do that a few times and for whatever reason, I'm not seeing whether we're actually live. So we may not be, but anyway, this will be put on a YouTube channel and then I will be posting it on the site later. But for our viewers, I'd just like to go ahead and do an introduction about you. And basically, you are the author and the publisher of the two children's cultural book series known as Amma Tell Me and Amma Take Me.
So, we just a small correction. So, I'm the author of both, but I'm the publisher of Amma Tell Me. Amma Take Me is published by Penguin.
Okay, okay. I'm sorry. Yes, yes, that's correct. And it's interesting that you've actually. Most people may be surprised to know that we're talking about your books, but you have a background in economics and finance, and you were a banking professional for I believe 20 years before you turned towards writing. And you have a bachelor's degree in economics and a master's degree in finance, which you earned from the Delhi University. And currently, you're living in Hong Kong and with your husband and your two sons and your two dogs.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and I believe you also consider yourself, an enthusiast in yoga and running, hiking, things that I personally enjoy as well. So that's wonderful. You have a very interesting resume. So I'm so glad, to be able to learn more about you and our viewers to learn more about you, as I'm sure they may know of your books. So.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bhakti, this is a very special interview. As I said, you are the first for our organization. But apart from that, another reason why I was very excited and very thankful that you agreed to do this interview is because there's a connection directly between what our organization stood for and, of course, the top figure of our organization, Sadhguru Sant Keshav Das Ji, who's my grandfather. His profession, or what he did for a living, was doing Harikatha. And that is exactly what you would think of when you literally hear those two words, Harikatha, which is the various divine stories of the avatars of the Lord and the different pastimes and the leelas that Bhagwan had on earth. And he would lecture about that and bring that into a story form, and along with that sing bhajans that would sort of bring the entire lecture into perspective about whatever the topic is that he was discussing or that he was preaching about. So that storytelling was such an integral part of what he did. That obviously connects to what you're doing through your books, for young children, which is wonderful. And personally with me, on a personal level, this is special because When I was growing up, of course, my grandfather's stories were there, but I was not, I couldn't comprehend much of what he was saying. But for me, what mattered, and I think it's the same for the kids these days, is the pictures and the simpler stories that children can comprehend. And that was something that I gained from the Amar Chitra Katha books, the comic books, when that came from India. I was born and brought up in the U.S., but for me, it was, those books kind of helped me understand these stories. And, I feel that, your version of these stories is a little more, is a little simpler even than that. And I think that's even better because sometimes children don't have the attention span to get through a long book and, a lot of detail. And so I really love the way that you've composed your books, and in terms of, the writing style, and we'll get more into that later. But I just love the artwork, and I feel like my son was gifted these two books. Amma Tell Me About Ramayana and Amma Tell Me About Diwali, and he can't get enough of them. He can listen to them numerous times, and we were gifted that for his birthday by one of our friends. So it's an awesome way that you have presented these stories. So in the modern times. So I really, for me, this is a special interview, and that's why I really connect with this. So one thing I guess we can just get into the interview is directly from my childhood into your childhood. Tell us about what type of personality you were growing up. Like how were you as a child, and were you quiet? Were you naughty? How were you as a student? And what were your hobbies and interests, like extracurricular activities, sports, something like that? What were you like as a child?
So I grew up in Delhi, and I think I was a curious child, bit of an introvert.
Uh-huh.
Read a lot. So, a lot of the influences came from my mother. My mother was a librarian. So very often in summer
Wow.
holidays, I would spend days in the library. Libraries, I guess, are inexpensive babysitters in a sense. And I think that's where I got the love for reading from. The reading was always a big part of our family. And one of the first memories I have of reading is sitting on my mother's lap and my mother reading Dr. Seuss to me. Horton Hears a Who. And I remember being mesmerized. And many, many years later, when I decided to start the Amma Tell Me series, one of the reasons I decided to write in rhyme was because I love Dr. Seuss so much. And I thought
Oh,
that kids find rhyme, fun. So that was an inspiration. And as you know, there was no iPhones, there was no internet. In fact, we didn't even have a television in our house for many years. But I had a male caretaker, like a male nanny, who would take care of me because my mother would be at work. And his name very aptly was Bhagwan. And
oh,
he couldn't read, he couldn't write, but he was the best storyteller that I've come across. So every day after I'd come back home from school, it would be like a 2-hour storytelling session with stories from the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. So I think my interest in mythology, a lot of it goes back to hearing those stories. And so, in a nutshell, to tell you, childhood was surrounded a lot by reading, by books, and things pan out so differently that many years later, the interest in mythology came out. And
wow.
when I had my children, my own kids, they are 10 and 12 now, but when around 10 years back, when the younger one was about 1.5, 2, that was the time that I really thought I wanted to tell them the stories that I grew up hearing and the festivals that I grew up celebrating. And that was the genesis of the Amma Tell Me series.
Oh, okay. Wow. That's wonderful. So, uh, I guess you would consider the caretaker who told you those stories, he would be the big influencer in this whole thing, which is
Yes, he certainly was. Yes. Yeah.
it's wonderful. Wow. You never really know in what form or who you might meet in your life that can actually bring some interest or plant a seed in you that may manifest
Yes.
later in life. That's really
Yes.
amazing.
Yeah.
Very
That's true.
inspiring. So then let's go into your educational life. I guess did you always have a calculative mind? It seems like with your banking career and finance, economics, and all that stuff. You must have been a very sharp math student.
Oh, I mean, you're Indian, so you know how Indian parents are. They're always pushing you
Yes.
to do well. And I see myself with my children. I don't think anything has changed. So what I studied was very much a function of what peers were doing.
Hmm.
And, economics, finance. I did the MBA in finance. Everyone was doing an MBA. It seemed a good way to land a lucrative um, job. And so that was really the thought process. I sometimes think about it now, what I would have done, because when I see the way my kids are being educated, it is so different, and it's really about what you're interested in, where your passion lies. I think I would have studied journalism or psychology if
Oh,
if I were to go back and pick up subjects just by way of interest.
right.
But I landed up doing studying economics and finance, and I enjoyed it actually. I'm happy for that. So yeah, it was really what most of my friends were doing or peers were doing at the time. So there
I
wasn't
see.
any deep thought into it.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was really to get into become a professional, to become financially independent. That was really the goal.
Got
And I was lucky to find a line. I was a private banker for many many years. I was lucky to find a line and work that I really enjoyed. So I had a very fulfilling career. I learned a lot and very satisfied with it.
That's wonderful. So when I was reading about you, I saw that you had spent some time in Singapore as well. Um, uh, what was
I,
that part of
no,
your career? Was that
no,
part of?
I've lived in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
No, I've been in Hong Kong for the past 20 years, and I
Okay.
worked with a Dutch bank called ING. And after the crisis of 2008, the financial crisis, they
Yes.
sold the private bank to a Singaporean bank called OCBC. And OCBC rebranded it as the private bank as Bank of Singapore. So you may have read that. So I worked with Bank of Singapore
I
for
see.
a while, but I didn't
Okay.
really live in Singapore.
Okay. So when did you actually move to Hong Kong?
20 years back in 2000.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, long time.
So did you start a job in India and then sort of just
Yes,
okay.
yes, I did. So I finished studying in India in 95. I started working in India. I worked with an investment bank, and then I worked with a mutual fund company. And
Mhm.
then in 2000, moved out of India. So I worked for a short while in India, about 5 years.
Oh, okay. Okay. Wonderful. So, um, tell me a little bit about, if you don't mind, about your husband. Where did you guys meet, uh, uh, and how is he based? What is he doing right now?
So we met in Mumbai, where I was working, and we were working in the same organization, and that's how we met. And
Mhm.
he's also been in finance. He's in private equity, and he runs a golfing business. And he's the editor of all my books. So he's
Oh,
my biggest. He's my, how do I put it? He's my biggest supporter and my biggest critic.
yeah. We usually tend to have that in our spouses, so that's nice.
Yeah.
Um, So let's talk, more about your books now. You said that your children inspired you to write these books, um, and of course the influence that you had, or the memories that you had from the stories you heard when you were a child from your caretaker. But it's interesting to think about, because when you're younger, or when you're a child, your mother or your grandmother, somebody tells you these stories orally, right? And children sometimes visualize what's going on in the stories and all that. But what made you feel the confidence or the conviction that, you know what, I want to write these into books, and I want to publish them, and I want these to be in households, like other people can benefit from this. I want to bring this, mainstream, so to speak.
So,
What made you feel that way?
sure. So my mother and my grandmother also have been influences in the way that you mentioned,
Mhm.
about storytelling. And I remember every Diwali, all of us cousins would huddle around my grandmother, and she'd tell us a story about Lakshmi, which I put in the Diwali book,
Yes.
actually from memory. So, I didn't think so much about it, Pratyaksh. For me, it was, I want to share this. I remember Holi was coming. It was 2010. It was the end of the year, around November, and Holi was coming in March. And I couldn't find anything for my son. And I was sitting with my husband, and I said, I want to write a book and tell him the story in my way. And he said, that's a great idea. Just do it. And it sounded like a Nike ad at that point of time, but, encouragement. So it happened quite naturally. And because it was a labor of love and it was for my children, I hadn't really thought of how it would reach the masses. Of course, it was at the back of my mind, and I'm really grateful that it's happened and very appreciative of that. But the main idea was just to write a book, and even if my kids would have appreciated it and read it, I would have been happy. So I wasn't focusing so much on the outcome, I was focusing more on the process.
Wonderful.
So for me, it was like, okay, how do I write it? I write it in rhyme. Let's find the illustrator. How do I find one? I asked a few friends. Then somebody recommended my illustrator, who we worked together now for 10 years, called Moulshri Somani. And her illustrations are fantastic. And she was working with Disney at the time in India, and she had just left and wanted to do something on her own. And
Okay.
we were introduced, and I asked her to draw something for me, and she made this beautiful peacock. And I just felt that she was able to, or would be able to capture my words into images. And we
Hmm.
started working. So I was focused a lot on all this, and at the same time I was thinking, should I go the traditional publishing route and call publishers, or should I publish myself? So I read a lot about self-publishing, and having a bit of an economics and finance background, I very quickly figured that self-publishing is definitely more lucrative, more risky, but also more lucrative. And
Hmm.
I also, since this was something I was doing for my family, for the kids,
Yes.
um, I felt that I wanted my successes to be my successes and my failures to be my failures. So I wanted to do things my own way. I didn't want a publisher coming and saying, "Oh, we don't like this cover. Let's change it, or let's use another illustrator. Let's change the format. This isn't working." I just wanted to do it my way, and that was a big thing for me, and that's why I decided to self-publish. So to answer your question, I didn't really focus on what will happen if it doesn't work. For me, the focus really was on how do I write this book in a
Yeah.
way that's true to me,
Right. Right.
uh, and the way that I'd like my kids to hear the story.
That's wonderful. I was actually thinking about asking you about the illustrator and the illustrations in your book, because if you look at, like, you brought up Dr. Seuss, which is also a very popular amongst children even now, and it's a classic.
Yes,
And
yes,
their artwork and their figures, their characters have very distinguishable looks. They have certain, you can tell it's a Dr. Seuss book just by looking at the illustrations.
yes, yes.
So I think your books are similar. You can just understand. I know that, but just by the title, they'll know it's part of the series. But if you were to open the book without looking at the title, I think just by the illustrations, we could tell that this is part of that series, and it's
Oh, thank
very,
you. Wonderful.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's very unique and identifiable. So I actually, I think that's one of the first things that a child relates to is pictures. More than the words, it's the pictures. So
Thank you.
and the characters are so well. I just feel like on the page, the size of the characters, the way it's drawn, is really nice. So
Thank
so that's really cool. And the fact that you actually composed the words, in rhyming format, like you mentioned earlier. That's also something I think that most children identify with. You know, in because they start off listening to nursery rhymes and things like that. So many children's books, at least in the introductory levels, are rhyming. So it's very interesting that you chose that format as
you.
well. And was it difficult for you when you were actually writing it to think of, like, because it's interesting how making all these rhyme, but then you're having the characters of these stories, you're putting that in, and then you're rhyming with English words. Was it a challenge for you to actually come up with the words?
Oh yes, huge challenge. I had to get a sense of rhythm and meter, which I still struggle with, but I think hopefully I've gotten better over the last 10 years. But yes, it was hard. It was hard. Because as you said, there are names of characters, but at the
Yeah.
same time, you wanted to rhyme and you wanted to, I wanted to tell the story in a simple way for
Yes.
kids. So putting all those elements together, it was difficult. It still is.
But it's, at least from the two books that I've read, it's brilliant. So, I totally enjoyed reading them to my son. So, um, let me ask you also. So then you what from the Amma Tell Me About Stories, you went into Amma Take Me. So was that? So what brought that out from you? Let me ask you, because
Yes.
you could have just continued the storytelling about these festivals and all that, but now you're talking about
Yes.
uh, you know what you call tourist attractions or whatever, religious
Yes.
places of visit, worship, places of worship.
Yes. It's the
That,
worship. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So yes, that's a good question. I'm still continuing with the Amma Tell Me series.
Okay.
It has 12 titles, and I'm working on the 13th one. But the credit for the Amma Take Me series actually goes to Penguin. So they approached me wanting to do something, and they came up with this idea, and I really liked this idea. So my editor in India, Shoini Mitra, she came up with this idea of places of worship, and I thought this is so fantastic because when I grew up again, all the books that I would read about, temples or mosques or mausoleums or churches, they were so didactic, and I'd fall asleep. That's what I remember. So I said, it's a great idea. Why not write something in a fun and entertaining way, in a sort of a travelogue, so that when people read it, they can relate to it and actually feel like visiting the place. So I started with the Golden Temple and actually traveled with all these to all the places I've written about. There are 4 books in the series, so I've traveled with the kids everywhere, and the book is in the format of sort of conversation between a mother and her 2 sons, and
Mhm.
they're based on the questions that my kids actually asked me when I
Okay.
visited each of these places. So, Golden Temple, they were very curious about the gurus, about the history, even a little bit about the violence, then about the langar, so I tried to put all that in. Then we went to Tirupati, and they were just fascinated with this temple on top of a hill and how Vishnu is dressed so beautifully. What's the story behind that?
Yes.
And of course, they love Tirupati Laddu. And then we did Dargah of Salib Chishti, which is near Agra, which is the mausoleum of the famous Sufi saint Salim Chishti.
Mhm.
And there was a lot of history of Akbar and of the Mughals, which was very fascinating, and about this simple saint. And then we did Shirdi, and Shirdi was very special because Shirdi also, Sai Baba Shirdi was a living saint who lived, like 100 years back, died 100 years back. So again, very fascinating. So I think that's what I've tried to capture, the questions that they actually ask, and what they want to know. And of course, they've gotten very clever now because they know I need their questions, so they've started bribing me.
Right.
But yes, so it was really, that's the endeavor, and I feel that if people pick up these books and it encourages them to visit these places with their kids, I feel I would have done a good job as an author.
Oh, I'm sure. I haven't personally seen those books or read those books, but are they similar in terms of? Are you also using rhyme in that, or is it straight?
No, I'm not. I'll just show you I've actually just got a few right here. So the Amma Tell Me is for, I would say, 3 to 8 year olds. And the Amma Take Me, which is a travelogue, is for, I would say, 8 to 12 year olds. So it's middle grade. And so I have some of them here. So this is the one of the Golden Temple. So they are illustrated, but they are written in free verse because it's really a conversation between me and the kids. And yes, it has illustrations. So it's for slightly older children.
Got it. Wonderful.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting how you have these two unique series. One where you're, where they're hearing the stories about or the significance of something, And then, of course, even in the Take Me To, the significance is being told, but of what they're seeing. But there's more of a inspiration to actually visit these places. So that's really wonderful. So
Thank you.
let me ask you, whenever you would hear these stories as a child, and of course, as a child, I think there's a little bit more of a fascination, and you tend to go more into a fantasy world and try to visualize what you're being told and all that stuff. And of course, those things were brought to life when the Ramayana and Mahabharata and all these shows were actually started airing on TV and things like that. You must have watched them, right?
Yes.
And of course, they were re-aired
Yes.
recently, which is really cool in India, and they were breaking all the ratings records and all that, from what I've heard. Um, but let me ask you, what are your personal takeaways, or what do you gain from these stories when you think about it for yourself personally? Uh, how do they
So,
connect?
as a child, it was very fascinating to hear about these brave kings and the most evil of adversaries. And, our villains are great villains.
Yeah.
Whether it's Ravan or whether it's Duryodhan, they're interesting characters. And also, especially in the case of Ravan, I feel it's not all black and white, it's shades of gray. He had a lot of good qualities, a lot of good things about him. So as a child, it was just fascinating. But as an adult, I think mythology is a great parenting tool, simply because they have characters and they show how characters behave and they show the consequences of that behavior. So
Mhm.
I find very often if I tell my child, be good, don't lie, work hard, it just falls on deaf ears because it's so preachy and they're like, oh, there you go again. But if I show them a story in which a character has worked hard and then he's got a certain reward, or if a character has behaved in a way which is not okay, then what are the consequences of that? So, when Ravana kidnaps Sita, there are consequences of that later. Or when, let's say, Hanuman is a good friend, how is he a good friend? What does he do? And, what are the consequences of that? So I find it's very easy for them to relate to a character because suddenly it becomes real. So it's a really good parenting tool to show virtues of hard work, compassion, friendship, humility. So that's where I find it very useful.
That's great, and I think that's what we want to imbibe in our children, so that at least um, they have a good head on their shoulders, and they make good decisions and make good
Yeah.
friends and things like that. Yeah.
And the other thing I think which is very good about in the Hindu mythology is that there is one truth, there's one reality, which is Brahman,
Yes.
and all religions say that with different words. But our mythology gives us different ways to reach it. So my favorite god, for example, is Hanuman, because as a child, I loved, I just loved, oh, he's a monkey, he's naughty, but he has such good qualities, he's loyal, he's super fit. So I could relate to all those things. But
Mhm.
for somebody else, it could be Ram. For somebody else, it could be Durga. For somebody else, it could be Ganesha. So, it gives you a broad spectrum to relate to animals. We have animal gods, or to relate to people, to relate to women, Durga, Parvati. And that's what I think the brilliant thing is. And, eventually having a god in your mind, it just helps you. I think it helps you become mentally stronger in whichever form you want to focus. At the end of the day, it's focusing your energy and believing in a higher power. So I think our mythology gives us different avenues to do that,
Yes. Yes.
which children don't understand. I mean, I didn't understand that as a child, but
Right.
I understand it now as an adult.
Of course. Of course. So, there's recently I saw a video or a conversation where they had some Ramayana actors and Mahabharata actors who had joined, and they were talking about myths, mythology, and you've said the word mythology numerous times, and so my question to you is, and it's not really, I think what you were getting at, which was the morals, the values, the mental strength, and just all that stuff is what the most important thing is, at least at a foundation level. But I'm wondering, what do you feel about the truth of these stories? Do you really believe that they happen? Because there's been discussions and debates about when you talk about the Ramayana or the Mahabharata or what happened during those times, it seems like those were some fantasy times or something like that. For many people, they can say, oh, these are just stories that are supposed to help us think the right way or act the right way, but they probably didn't happen. There's a belief like that. But then, modern day science is discovering that maybe there's the Dwaraka kingdom under the water, or there's the Rama Setu underwater. I remember the guy who played Duryodhan in Mahabharata, he said that test tube babies, what modern day science is discovering, is something that existed back then, because the Kauravas were all sort of test tube babies in little pots or something like that, and
Yes.
the Brahmastra could be looked upon as that time's nuclear weapon, that's something so destructive, so they say certain stories, like how Ganesha came about, like how he was guarding his mother's his mother had gone to take a shower and he was guarding the door, and Shiva came and beheaded him, but he didn't know who it was. And then turns out, he's the god that we first pray to. So there could be some story, moral stories or something like that to take from that. Maybe there's a mythological side to that, but they often say that, the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, and largely the stories and the characters that are in those epics are really representing something historic and something that actually happened. How do you perceive it?
So I think it's hard to say whether it actually happened or not on a surface level. There is,
Right.
as you said, there is historical evidence now coming out, about the war having happened there. The Pandavas traveled from here to there. But to me, when I think of it, Pratyaksha, it actually doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because the stories are so fascinating. And what is reality? Kids often ask me these questions when I do book readings in schools. They often ask me this: is this story real? When I tell them about the Ramayana, did this actually happen? And I always ask them, I said, is Harry Potter real for you? And then they're quiet. And then I said, what is reality? Reality is, if it's real for you, it is real. And I think immersing yourself in this world, it certainly makes it very real for me. So that's how I look at these things. The other thing I often think about is, if you look at the Mahabharata, it's a story about two warring clans. And what I feel is, Vyasa, who wrote it,
Mm-hmm.
there must have been, either he had this fantastic imagination, or what I gear towards is, there was obviously a thriving civilization at the time where these things were happening. So there were feuds between families, there was disrespect for women, there were fights, people were banished, treated badly. And I think he's, just 1 minute.
Oh, no problem.
Yes. And I think he's, obviously for him to have this rich story with so many backstories and side stories and this sort of array of characters, I feel that, I'm more likely geared to the fact that actually parts of it happened, if not the whole.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Great perspective.
Yeah.
So, apart from just these stories and what we look at on a surface level, or what we do from a day-to-day, how we imbibe, or how we have these qualities kind of work through us on a day-to-day basis, just to kind of get through, every day with our children or at work or whatever. We often gain some inspiration from these stories, and some qualities of that kind of just resonate with us. But when we go a little deeper into understanding, like we can talk about the Bhagavad Gita, right? That's where we come to know where Krishna explains that we are the Atman, or we are then there's Brahman, and it's the realization of who we truly are that we ultimately is our goal, through the journey of our birth and death cycle, or what have you. So that's where I think spirituality is sets itself apart from religion or religious practices or rituals, or anything like that.
Yes.
So have you ever delved into or looked into spiritual side of things, or the spiritual sphere, if you will? And what are some of the things that you do, that you may do, to explore that?
So for me, spirituality is really about connecting to my inner self.
Hmm.
That's how I define it.
Yeah.
The inner self, which is pure and it's full of goodness and love, as the Bhagavad Gita says when Krishna explains. And so that's the essence of spirituality for me. Religion, to me, whenever somebody asks, what does religion mean to you? Because I write about, Hindu folk tales and mythology. I always remember an interview that Dalai Lama gave when he was asked, what is your religion? And he said, my religion is kindness. So I feel that, if you're following all kinds of rituals and even reading the Bhagavad Gita and maybe 10 other scriptures, but you cannot be kind and compassionate,
Yes.
you haven't succeeded. And for me, somebody who doesn't go to temples or doesn't do any chanting, but just is a wonderful human being, is spiritual and is following his
Yes.
religion or his own religion. So that's how I look at it. Some of the things that have really helped me is, one is doing yoga. I find that actually practicing yoga brings me back to my inner self and gives me a sense of calm. The other thing is writing my thoughts down, as in journaling. That again centers me a lot. And I find listening to the Bhagavad Gita. So we have, similar to your setup, we have the Chinmaya mission, which is active in Hong Kong.
Yes.
And we have a lady, Swaminiji, who heads it here and holds Gita classes. But now, of course, in COVID, we've been hearing the recordings chapter wise on WhatsApp, which has been fantastic. So I think these are a few of the things that help me. And just the understanding that it's not about rituals, but it's about your behavior, and it's your behavior on a daily basis with all the people that you uh, come in contact with, is
Yes.
what is really, and if you do that with compassion and kindness, and of course I struggle with that. Not saying that I'm perfect at that, I do struggle with that, but I think I've at least had that realization that that is really spirituality, and that is really being religious. Is yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think we all, at least some of us who are at least on the path of working towards those things, we're not perfect, but we all have to keep at it, and whatever makes us feel good, and and sort of gives positive vibes to others around us, that's what we have to continue doing. And like personally speaking, I've just started to do a little bit of meditation, and right
Yes.
now I'm not at a point where like I can do it on my own without any audio or anything like that. I kind of feel like I need that little om chanting going on. So I'll put my headphones on and just kind of close my eyes, or I'll do like an art of living guided meditation or something like that. But I think we all have to start somewhere. Once we realize that, hey, I should explore this. I think it makes me feel good.
Yes.
It takes all the stresses away out of your mind. It's just like,
Yes.
you could be the most stressed out person, but then once you do that practice, whether it be chanting or whether it be meditation or whatever, as long as you're doing it freely without much effort, it just makes you feel rejuvenated at the end of it.
I agree. Some of the things that have helped me also is meditation. And in meditation, what I find very useful is those, I don't know if you can really call it meditation, is pranayama, which is a part of yoga where you're
Yes.
focusing on the breath. And
Yes.
it's again very similar to what in Buddhism they say vipassana, watching the breath.
Mhm.
And there are some brilliant videos again for vipassana, and they have a kind of breath technique called anapana, which is if your mind is really very scattered and you want to bring it back. So to get you into the meditative state, they have something called anapana, where you observe the breath just at the entrance of the nose. So I find that very interesting for days when the mind is very agitated. And I'm sure you found lots of apps, but one of the apps that I've been using is, and whose books I really like, is by this Vietnamese Buddhist monk called Thich Nhat Hanh, who actually is based in France. And there is a app called the Plum Village. I think it's called the Plum Village app. and it has fantastic short meditations if you ever want to, short and long, if you ever want to check them out. So those are some of the things that have helped me or are helping me.
Oh, that's wonderful. So, one thing that is always in the back of our minds these days, and we as a global community are living through it, is this pandemic of COVID-19. So we're all dealing with it. We're, especially where I'm living, there are so many thousands of cases daily. It tends to, so that's why, when this pandemic began and we all were shut down, and everybody was told to work from home and keep their kids home and all that, we used to watch the news to kind of keep up with the updates and see what maybe we thought, it would actually go away. We were all hopeful that, okay, a month or two, and then we'll probably be back at normal life and everything, but it wasn't the case. And obviously, some of us didn't take it seriously. I'll speak for myself. I think I kind of underestimated what this pandemic was at the onset, and we are seeing the effects of what it can be and how quickly it can spread. We're all plagued with it, but I think that's when we realized, like, we shouldn't watch the news because that's all we're going to hear about, and no matter who you talk to, this is what we're going to discuss also. So I think over time we have adapted. We've learned that we have to wear masks now. We have to follow the safety protocols, and we've made it we've understood that this is part of our lives now. But when this started, or as the months have passed, how has it impacted you personally, and what are the positives of it that you have seen, in the sense that what have you been able to create more time for that maybe previously you weren't able to? If you can just tell us.
Yeah. So yes, COVID has been, um, it's really been hard. It's been hard globally. And somebody sent me, one of those one-liner jokes the other day saying, the award for the best teacher goes to, and it said COVID. And I think it's right in a lot of ways. COVID has been a big teacher. We've been very fortunate in Hong Kong, though it started early because of China in February. The city contained it very well. So we never had a full lockdown here, ever. So we were always allowed to go out. Yes, there was restrictions on the number of people gathering, and you had to wear masks, etc. But pretty much there was never a full lockdown. But I know it's been severe in many parts of the world.
Yes.
I think for me, I think I did feel anxiety, and at that one point of time, there was anxiousness, and just on the scale of the global pandemic, then the schools were closed, so it was challenging for the kids as well to get used to online learning. But I think it's really taught me a lot about myself. One of the things I realized is that the joys in life are really simple thing, and we don't need many things to be happy, and whatever we need to be happy is right under our noses, and we miss it. So I think family time was really good. A lot of time together, just talking, playing board games, watching movies, spending moments and creating special moments. The other thing that I really enjoyed and realized is how much joy being in nature gives me. Just going for long walks, hikes, that was wonderful. And I also realized that I love spending time with myself, and I'm a bit of an introvert, and I was almost heaving sighs of relief when people weren't meeting and all, sort of dinners and parties were canceled. And that made me think how much or how many unnecessary things we fill our days with, things that are just not needed. And you need very few things to be happy. You don't need materialistic things beyond a level of being comfortable. So yeah, those were some realizations, and some of the offshoots were a lot of cooking, reading, writing, productive time. Yes, so that's what it was for me.
Oh, that's wonderful. This is definitely eye-opening. Obviously, we know what it's taken away from us, but we also feel blessed that we are able to realize certain passions that we have, or certain hobbies that we can start, that this pandemic has actually given us the chance to do. So I completely agree with you on that, people. So So you did mention in sort of as we wrap up here, you did mention that you're still working on the Amma Tell Me About stories and
Yes,
all that stuff.
yes.
So tell me a little bit about, I don't know if you're able to reveal what the next book is going to be, or if you can just tell us what if you already have kind of chalked out some
No,
future
I
ideas.
can.
Yeah.
So I'm just in the process of doing the next book, which is on the first avatar of Vishnu. So I'm doing the avatars of Vishnu when he came as the Matsya, as a
Yes.
fish. Yes, so that's I thought those stories are fascinating. Something again I wanted to I've shared with my kids. So yeah, so that's the next project there.
Oh, great, great. So I guess you're going to do the Dashavatars or something like that.
Yes, yes,
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
yeah.
Um, and I guess, I just like to conclude here by once again thanking you. It's been an enriching experience talking with you and sharing the thoughts and, getting your wonderful answers to my questions. I really appreciate you taking the time. And, I can't wait to get my hands on more books so that I can have my son hear some new stories. And but I just want to tell everybody who's watching that these books, Amma Tell Me About and Amma Take Me, are available on Amazon. So please certainly think of these. These are great gift ideas, and definitely I can tell you firsthand, as I said, my son loves them, and I know many friends whose kids love your books. And once they knew that I was going to speak with you, they messaged me and said, "Oh, my daughters love her books." So
Oh, wow.
they're all spread out in different parts of the U.S., but they all know of you and have read your books. So I really
Thank
want
you so
to
much.
I really want to thank you for your time and your kindness and everything that you have explained to us with such patience. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank, thank, thank you so much, Prataksha. It was wonderful, speaking with you, and thank you so much. And I'm honored to be the first person who you thought of when you decided to start this series of interviews. And also, I wanted to congratulate you on carrying forward the legacy of your grandfather. I think that is absolutely fantastic.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your good wishes. And we hope you stay safe and your family has a lot of happy moments going forward. So thank you so much.
All the same. Thank you so much, Prataksha.
All right,
Thank you.
take care. Bye.